Lessons 11 and 12 are on loops. Loops are when you want a program to do something over and over. For example, we just did the calculator program in lesson 10. What if we wanted to be able to add more than one thing or subtract more than once? And we wanted the program to keep running until we told it to stop. We would want to use some kind of a loop that made the program run over and over and over. So we're going to start out with a for loop. Um, for loops are used usually when you know how many times you want something to happen. So for example, for j equals 3, j less than or equal to 79. That's going to happen starting with j3, and it's going to keep going until j is 79, and the j++ is going to add 1 every time. So we know how many times this would happen. Um, for loops have three main parts inside there. The first is called the initializing expression. The j equals 3. When we start this, j is going to be 3. And then the last part of it is called the step expression. So the j++ tells j to go up by 1 every time. We could also use something like j minus minus, which would make j go down by 1 every time. Or we could have it count by twos or do any different kind of a thing. But the most common thing is going to be to use j++ because usually we want it to go up by 1. We're going to count by ones and do something over and over. And then the other important part is what's in the middle here of these three sets uh, between the two semicolons, and that's called the control expression. We're going to keep going if this is true. We're going to stop if it's false. So as long as j is less than or equal to 79, it keeps going. So it does it for 3, it does it for 4, it does it for 5, it keeps going. It does it for 78, it does it for 79. When j becomes 80, it doesn't do it again. So those are the three main parts inside a for loop. Um, One place where people will make mistakes is if they put something that can never be false, then you can get a loop that never exits. And we don't want to do that unless it's on purpose, and that would normally be a bad thing. The other main problem that people will do is do something that is always false, and then it will never do that loop. So if it said in here j greater than 79, if we start at 3 and we say go as long as j is greater than 79, well, it's not, so it would never happen. So the for loop is started just like this. And one thing that's also important is if you can declare your step variable inside the loop. As soon as it leaves the loop, it forgets about it. So we couldn't print j when we left the loop if we have int j equals 3 inside. Sometimes we'll want to declare the j before we go into the loop, um, and then we can modify it when we're inside there. So an example might be if I want something to count. So I can say for, and then in parentheses, j, let's see, int j equals 1, j less than or equal to 10. That was supposed to be a semicolon, j++, and then I start a new set of curly braces. It makes the other one for me, and I can do system.out.println j. And if I run it, it will count starting at 1. It'll go as long as j is less than or equal to 10. So it did 10 and then it stopped. If I leave the curly braces and I do system.out.println j, it gives me an error because it doesn't know what j is. J is only useful inside here because inside the for loop is where I said int j. Now I could do that, like I said a minute ago, I could do that outside the loop. I could say int j, and then inside here, I'm going to say what j equals. So j is going to start at 1 and going to count up. If I run this, it will print for the entire loop up to 10. Then it leaves when j is no longer less than or equal to 10. And because of this last print statement, it printed the 11 at the very end. All right. When we leave the for loop, j equals a plus. When we leave the for loop, j equals 11. So that's how a for loop is created. Notice that we use the curly braces. That's because we might want to do multiple things inside that loop. And so we usually don't do just one thing. We usually have a lot of things going on inside the loop. If we have only one thing that's happening, we could just use a semicolon at the end. But one place where people make mistakes is if they put a semicolon at the end of the line with a for loop, like we usually have semicolons on our lines. If we run this, it will count up to 10, but it only prints one time because the for loop ends when it sees the semicolon. If we get rid of the semicolon, then the for loop goes for what's inside the curly braces. So a semicolon at the end of this line, just like the semicolon at the end of an if line, normally won't work out too well. Right. We can also do things like nested loops. A nested loop is when you have a loop and then you have another loop inside of it. And so the things inside the loop will happen a number of times, and then the outer loop starts over. So you can have something happen over and over, even more times that way. Right. So let's take a look at how this might be useful. I'm going to go back and grab my code from lesson 10. From my case statement. And I'm going to put that inside my loop here. And I'm going to run it. And I put that on there twice. I can't have that inside and outside of the loop. So let's run it again. It's going to let me, let's see, this time I'm going to add 1 and 2. 1 plus 2 equals 3. And then it says, make your arithmetic selection from the choices below. And I can choose to add again or subtract or whatever I want to do. This time I'm going to subtract 1 and 2, and 1 minus 2 is negative 1. And I could keep doing this as long as I have times left in my for loop. Next time we'll talk about do loops or while loops, and in those are probably a better choice for this kind of a thing because this will only let me add 10 times and then it will end. And it's no longer asking me if I want to do it because I did it 10 times because that's what I set up for my for loop. So in the project for lesson 11, you're going to go through and you're going to print something over and over. You're going to print somebody's name backwards. And like it says, you're going to use a for loop and you're going to use substring to get a reversal of the person's name. So if the name was Peter Ustav, it would print Peter Ustav backwards. So let me give a little starter for that one, get you started, and then you can finish this one. So first of all, you're going to start out with the normal skeleton that we have each time with the system.in, and you'll have some kind of a prompt. like, what is your name? And then you will do the string name equals KB reader. And then if I print it, I can type in my name. I spelled it poorly, but it did repeat exactly what I spelled. So how could I make a loop that will go through and print each letter one letter at a time? Well, first of all, I would like to find out how long my name is, and we have a method that does that. So I'm going to make a new int that's going to be, I'm going to call it name length, and it's going to equal name dot length. All right, so now I know how long my name was. This will be different for everybody. And now I'm going to set up a for loop. So I'm going to do for int j equals 0, j less than name length, and then j plus plus. So this will go through each letter of my name one letter at a time. And then I'll do my curly braces. And inside here, I'm going to do system.out.println, and I'm going to do name.substring j. And let's see what happens if I do that. Oh, I need extra parenthesis to complete my print statement. So if I run that and I put in my name, it didn't work exactly like I wanted, but it did print the first letter. It started my name starting with the G. It did that twice because I told it to do that up there. So let's comment out that one. And then it started on the second letter, third letter, fourth letter, fifth letter, sixth letter. So it's working correctly, except that it printed all of my name each time, and it didn't go backwards. So I'm going to leave those two things for you to fix. One thing is you want to think about where do you want to start. I started at 0. Where should you start? And then the other thing you should think about is how are you going to use substring correctly so it doesn't print the entire word starting at that index, that it only prints one letter at a time. Those are two things that we've looked at in the past.